The U.S. House voted to rescind tariffs imposed on Canada last year, although the White House will likely veto the resolution, even if it gets through the Senate. Let's welcome Julian Karaguesian, former Finance Ministry Special Advisor, lecturer now at McGill. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Marilla.
So this seems more symbolic than anything else, but doesn't make much of an impression.
Well, it is a breaking of ranks in the Republican Party, albeit a small one, but it is powerfully symbolic, particularly given that it's an election year, it's a midterm year. We've got the Supreme Court decision on you could call it the legitimacy of some of President Trump's tariffs. And we've got ongoing CUSMA negotiations. So, the courts make their decisions based on arguments and facts, but the members of the Supreme Court also watch television and follow the news, and this could influence that outcome. We don't know, but it certainly gives a small symbolic boost to Canada as during the ongoing CUSMA negotiations, and it's a setback for the Trump administration on a core economic policy of theirs, probably the core policy.
Trump, of course, has threatened the Republicans who did support it in the House. But what can he really do?
What can President Trump really do?
Yes, to the Republicans who voted against him. He can make their life miserable in certain ways, I guess.
Yeah, he can. Yeah, he can make their life miserable by campaigning for candidates, rival Republican candidates that are more pro-MAGA in the upcoming midterm elections. That's probably the most punishing thing he can do to the members. And he probably, I would expect that he will do that, as he's done that before in previous elections. Those threats are credible ones, actually.
Okay, so of the Republicans who did support this with the Democrats, was there a clear reason you think that aligned them?
I think there was. I mean, it was an interesting mix of states: California, Colorado, Washington State, Pennsylvania. And what aligned them, I think, was that the tariffs there was two things. The tariffs are hurting their constituents in terms of raising prices, raising the cost of living, and also hurting businesses in their states, because Canada is the largest trading partner for 37 U.S. states. I think Mexico and China may beat us out, or Mexico may beat us out as the #1 trading partner now, barely. Canada is now #2, but we're still an immense trading partner for much of the United States. So there's really two compelling reasons that these members of the House, Republican members, the 6 members, broke ranks here. And presumably that's the tip of the iceberg. We saw the bipartisan Congressional Budget Office come out earlier this week and note that most of the increase in most of the tariffs are being borne by consumers, most of the cost of the tariffs. And a separate Federal Reserve report, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, said that the United States as a whole is bearing the cost, like 85 to 90% of the cost. And President Trump said that the rest of the world would pay the cost of the tariffs, and it's actually not the case.
What is your sense of the U.S. Supreme Court and what it will decide? We had expected some sort of decision some time ago. Clearly, we haven't had it yet. Does that tell you anything? What do you expect the U.S. Supreme Court to do here?
I think it's a very, very difficult, very painful decision for them to make. There are more Republicans on the Supreme Court than Democrats, and yet the facts weigh in favor of limiting the president's authority to impose tariffs using national emergency measures. So using IEEPA measures, International Emergency Economic Powers Act. And so I think their hearts may be with President Trump, yet the facts are against his authority to use tariffs. So I think that explains part of the delay. I think this is going to be delayed as long as possible, because it's going to influence the CUSMA negotiations. So apparently, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said it could come any day. I think we're hearing that it may come in the next few weeks, possibly months. But this is a very controversial decision either way, and I'm expecting that it's going to be delayed as long as possible.
That being said, even if they do rule against the powers under which he imposed tariffs, the president can go about it a separate way. So really, do you think it will affect CUSMA negotiations?
Well, it'll be if the Supreme Court decides to limit the White House's authority to use national emergency measures for tariffs. Particularly the case of fentanyl coming from Canada, which is just really, it's a ridiculous argument given how little Canada accounts for the trade. It will be another blow. The president has other avenues. He can use Section 232, which is national security measures to impose tariffs, and he has used those in a very big way. So he could go down that avenue and use his executive authority to do that. But, with the House voting against this, with the Senate likely to vote against the tariffs again, as they did several times last year, if the Supreme Court then comes down on this, and with 60% of adults, Americans, in a latest Pew Center poll saying that they don't support the tariffs, at some point, you expect that the White House may have to back off and peel back some of these tariffs.
Julian, I got to leave it there. I'm out of time. Julian Karaguesian is our guest today, Ministry Special Advisor and lecturer now at McGill University.